It's nice to be back on camera and making YouTube videos. In the past few months, it's been hectic to say the least. I have been moving, I switched job, and I just didn't have enough time to make a video and commit to, well, YouTube. But anyway, I'm here, I'm back, and from now on, I definitely am sure that I'm gonna make more content. Jesus, English hard. Anyway, as you can see, studio is a little bit different. In the new apartment, I have much more space, and this room is dedicated for work and YouTube videos. Okay, now that I laid out my excuses, let's continue from the previous video, and that's how to make a website in Figma. So we first kind of went through the interface of Figma just to be on the same page so everybody know where each button is and some basic functionalities. But in this video, I want to talk about grids. It's a very important topic, and I think very often misunderstood. Again, English very hard. There are two types of grid you need to be aware of. So there is a spacing grid, usually known as 4-point or 8-point grid. And then there is the other one called column grid. So when you talk with designers, you will most likely talk only about this 4 or 8-point grid. But when you talk with developers, they will ask you about column grid. And why is that? Well, many websites today are made using Bootstrap or some custom-made, let's say, CSS framework. And developers need this column kind of layout in order to put content where it belongs, in order to make a responsive website. So for this example, we're gonna use Doist website, which is the owner of Todoist app. Many of us use it. I love it, so this is the reason why I picked their landing site, and it's quite simple, so I think it's perfect for this exercise. And just by digging a little bit, I figured they probably use Bootstrap. And if we look in Figma, I have a screenshot of Doist website, and this is column grid they probably use because everything aligns quite nicely, so I would assume it's something like that. In this example, I'm gonna think of Bootstrap because it's most widely used. And how do you actually know what to do with this column grid? Well, you need to know what's the size of column. Well, actually that's optional in Figma. And you need to know what's the gutter, so this spacing between these pinky lines. And in order to align with your developer, you need to ask what's max width if we are talking about desktop website, and then you need to know what's the gutter size, and that's pretty much it. I think you can go alone from that point. So here I'm gonna choose MacBook Pro, and then this is how I do it. There might be like better ways or whatever, but this is so quick that I just love it. I'm gonna put rectangle over here, and I know from documentation that Bootstrap's like max width grid is 1200 pixels, and I'm gonna center it. So this is basically the widest it can expand. And then you're gonna click on this frame 1 or any frame and click on this layout grid. You're not interested in this default setting over here. Go here and select columns. Also, from documentation, we know that Bootstrap has 12 columns. Of course, these settings can be tweaked if you talk with your developer. It's actually quite simple like way to tweak all this base setup, but let's pretend we're going along with like default stuff. So we know that we have 12 columns. Let's leave gutter at 20 pixels, but then what I do, I just press shift and arrow up until I touch edges with this rectangle I just made. Yes, that's it. And then you can safely delete this helper rectangle, and there you go. That's basically what also developer has, but in code. And then you position your elements like this. And if your developer goes into your Figma file, they will easily replicate this layout just by using their code, their setup. This is how it works. I suggest discussing this topic a little bit more in detail with your developer. But anyway, let's talk about spacing grid a little bit. So that means that you have increments of 4 or 8, and with that information you create spaces or paddings between elements in your design. So I'm gonna just take this one rectangle, I'm gonna shrink it a little bit, I'm gonna use text tool, let's call it button, and I'm gonna select both, Shift A for auto layout, and we have our button that's responsive, but we need to tweak it a little bit. So make sure it's on auto height, and then from the sides, like padding from sides, let's put it like, I don't know, 16, because that's increment of 8. And then from top and bottom, let's put, like, for example, 8. This is irrelevant for button right now, but just to make sure if anything happens within, let's keep it at 8. For example, you might have an icon or something, so you want to keep that ratio correct. And this is our button. It's fully responsive, as you can see, and it works, and it always retains this 8-point grid inside, so it's 16:8 over here. Super simple. And also, if you want to position your elements following that grid system, you can, well, first let's go to settings a little bit, and let's go to preferences, and then let's go to nudge amount. Initially you will see something like this, 10, but if you delete and put 8, then you make your life a lot easier. So for example, we have 2 objects. If I press shift down arrow, for example, twice, it should be 16 pixels of spacing. And now you are actually conforming to 8-point grid. Also, if you want more, just keep nudging, and now you have 24. And that's actually quite great, because your developer can also create the same system in their code base, and then it's very predictable. Now they can just see, aha, this is 24, this is 16, and if you have some semantic naming in place, then it's extremely simple for them to follow your layout, your design, and actually replicate your designs, so it actually mirrors when it's actually done. Because usually what happens is you might not actually pay attention to these details. You might, go freestyle a little bit and put stuff like randomly without consulting with the developer, and then they of course can achieve that. But if they're using, like, for example, Bootstrap or some other CSS framework, they might not do it exactly like this, because it's simpler for them to just follow that grid. So that's very important to know. And this is it when it comes to grids. You don't need to know anything else at this point. With this knowledge, you can pretty much jump onto any project and just start working. For this video, let's wrap it up here. And in next video, I'm going to talk about typography, because that's next very important thing you need to know about setting everything in Figma in order to actually start designing. That's it. See you next time, and stay tuned. Bye bye.